Can you just talk about, Chief, what it meant to you to go through this process and to identify a candidate of his caliber and be able to bring him in here to lead the police department?
Well, the first conversation I had with Chief Bey was very encouraging. I think that we were really honest about the assessment. I knew that whoever was going to be coming into the department next, it was not going to be easy. We had gone through a lot over the summer, and with the departure of the previous chief, there was a leadership vacuum that needed to be filled, and filled quickly. And that challenge was not something that dissuaded him from stepping in, and he told me right from the start that he wasn't going to be keeping a warm seat. He was going to move and advance some of the initiatives. So we mapped out a 30-day, a 60-day, and a 90-day plan, and all of those objectives were met or exceeded.
The one thing that I kind of noticed last summer was there was a real push and pull. It didn't seem like there was a good marriage between the police department and the mayor's office. And talking to the chief, it seems like that certainly, at least right now, there is a good marriage here. Would you say that's going to help directionally?
Oh, yes. And I would say that last summer was, it's really hard to describe both what was happening here on our streets as well as the tidal wave that was happening nationally. And we really were caught as a community between, reckoning with what had happened with George Floyd and policing in America as it relates to policing and communities of color, as well as law enforcement and how we support law enforcement, and those narratives, if you will, between supporting law enforcement and supporting communities of color were presented as being in opposition, and they are not in opposition. And that is the challenge that we have navigated, is how do we talk about this in a way where we are supporting law enforcement and we are supporting communities of color simultaneously, and recognizing that there are reforms and changes that need to happen. We need to be more transparent. We need to be more engaging with the public. We need to be more culturally aware of the community, because we are a community that is a large number of Latino and Latina individuals. We have communities from across the globe. I just think about the countries that are represented here, and you got to know what your community is.
And I know, and I said this to the chief, he's got a ton of experience. But how important was it for you that he is a diverse candidate, that the folks that we saw out on the streets last year will have someone who looks like that?
I think it is, what's the word I'm looking for? It's an affront to Chief Bey to talk about him as if I only hired him because of the color of his skin. You just said it. He is incredibly qualified. And he also brings to this what he said, that it was personal to him as an African American man who is doing this job. And so for me, when I read his resume and then I talked to him on the phone and got to know who he was, that is why Chief Bey is our chief.
Yeah, I think that's important. I think what I was trying to ask you is it important for those in the community that we saw,
absolutely
that
important.
He looks like that?
Yes,
you know what I mean? I get that it's secondary,
yes,
or maybe even tertiary, but is it important to have someone? I mean, because a lot of them felt like that.
And it was important for me to say that, because there's a lot of people who are dismissing his experience and what he brings to the table in terms of his career because the fact that he is an African American man. And it is very important that young people see him. In fact, we were at a neighborhood meeting, and it was like, another person of color came up and said, it means a lot to see somebody like you at the top rank in the police department as a leader in our community who is African American. Yes, absolutely, it matters.
We talked about, you and I did, the whiteboard that we saw out in the courtyard area last year. How many of those items have you, there were a lot on there by the end, how many of those items do you feel like you've picked off, and what work is being done to make sure that you take care of the things that were important to the community?
Well, I think that one of the things that I learned very early on is that this is the relationship building with the community doesn't just happen when there's a crisis. It has to happen every day. And every day is how we are building trust and rapport with the community. And that is really a two-way street, and that is essential to preserving public safety and the safety of our officers. And so for me, as we're working through that list, it's just endless. And I think that that's just part of what the job is every day. So we've made a lot of progress with bike patrols and community engagement and integrating our police department in with our neighborhood engagement efforts, having an office of community engagement within the police bureau. All of these things are part and parcel. And so when you complement that with the investigatory skills that our team has, the patrol work, the good policing that we do, that is how we keep the community safe.
As far as your relationship with maybe some of the officers where it felt like it was splintered because of what had happened with the previous chief, do you feel like, Chief Bay and yourself, do you feel like you've kind of been able to patchwork that? Do you feel like everybody is working together now?
I think that we've had lots of conversations and people have had a lot of feelings about what happened last year, and those conversations are going to continue. What I would say now is that we have a very dedicated team of men and women who show up every day in uniform and are working very, very hard, and they continue to show up every day, and I believe that that speaks for itself.
What's the message to the residents of Lancaster with this hire, and where you see the police department and the relationship with the community moving forward?
I think that we are continuously here to serve you, and to the residents of the city of Lancaster, your safety is a priority.